Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the astonishing true story behind what is, honestly, history's ultimate mic drop. We're looking at a singular, violently explosive event that decided the entire fate of an empire in just 4 hours. And in the process, it gave us a phrase that has literally echoed through millennia.
All right, let's just dive right into it. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. It is undeniably the most famous three-word quote in human history. I mean, think about how pervasive this thing is. Over the centuries, these three words have been weaponized by political leaders to project absolute authority. They've been totally co-opted by pop culture, printed on countless t-shirts, referenced in hit songs, and studied in basically every classroom. It stands out as this enduring symbol of supreme confidence, incredible speed, and just absolute victory. It's the ultimate statement of showing up to a massive, complex problem and just decisively crushing it without breaking a sweat. But, it begs the question, where did history's most famous quote actually come from? Most people know the phrase, sure, but very few actually know its origin. It wasn't born in the marbled halls of Rome. It wasn't coined during the grueling, decade-long conquest of Gaul either. Actually, it was born far from the grandeur of the capital, way out on the dusty, sun-baked plains of Anatolia. It emerged from a lightning-fast clash that forever shifted the geopolitical fate of the Roman Empire. It is a crazy story of opportunism, dizzying speed, and brutal efficiency.
So let's get into Chapter 1, the ultimate mic drop. To really grasp the weight of these words, we first need to travel back and set our scene. We're heading to a super hot summer day in 47 BC. The setting is the ancient plains of Zela, which you might know today as the town of Zela, over in the Tokat province of modern Turkey. These were immensely fertile, millennia-old lands that had seen empires rise and fall way before the Romans ever showed up. But on this particular summer day, the peaceful, rolling landscape of Zela was about to be watered with blood all over again. It was prepping to host one of the most violently decisive reckonings of the ancient world.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, a clash of ambitions.
Now, the geopolitical chaos of this era perfectly sets the stage for our two brilliant but very different commanders. The world was completely distracted, and in moments of distraction, unchecked ambition really thrives. The guy taking full advantage of this chaos, a man named Pharnaces. He was the highly ambitious son of the legendary Pontic king Mithridates VI. See, Rome was literally tearing itself apart in a massive, bloody civil war between Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great. The Republic was an absolute mess. Pharnaces saw this massive Roman distraction as his golden ticket. He plunged Anatolia into total turmoil, seizing the chance to reclaim his dazzled territories and put his dynasty back on top. Knowing the Romans would eventually come knocking, he positioned his army defensively, way up on the steep hills of Zela, completely ready to hold his ground against whoever Rome managed to scrape together.
But Pharnaces made a fatal miscalculation by vastly underestimating his opponent. And that opponent was Julius Caesar. Just look at the immense contrast here. You've got Pharnaces holding the high ground, thinking he has all the time in the world and a supreme tactical advantage against a fractured Rome. And then you have Julius Caesar. Caesar had literally just wrapped up a brutal civil war campaign and some incredibly complex, dangerous affairs in Egypt alongside Cleopatra. His men were exhausted. They had been marching and fighting for years. But when Caesar heard about Pharnaces' little rebellion, he didn't take a break. He moved with this wind-like, almost terrifying speed. He pushed his veteran legions to the absolute limit, sweeping into Anatolia so fast that the dust of the Egyptian desert was quite literally still on his boots. He arrived relentless, highly motivated, and absolutely ready for an immediate fight.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, the 4-hour battle.
The setup here is just a fascinating tactical mismatch. You've got a deeply entrenched local king up on a hill versus a highly mobile, but probably exhausted, battle-hardened Roman force. This exact dynamic triggered one of the most violently decisive battles in the ancient world. So Caesar arrives, and Pharnaces does something completely wild. Instead of staying safely up on the defensive high ground, he launches this brazen, incredibly aggressive downhill charge right into the Roman legions before they could even finish building their camp. It was a total shock-and-awe tactic, and initially, it actually worked. The Romans really stumbled under the sheer, terrifying momentum of that downhill chariot and infantry assault. But these weren't just any soldiers. This was Caesar's veteran army, his legendary 6th Legion, men who had survived years of brutal combat in Gaul and a civil war. They quickly shook off the surprise. In an unbelievable feat of military discipline, they rallied their broken lines, locked their shields, and began a grueling, ruthless push right back up those steep slopes, carving their way to victory foot by bloody foot.
Now I want you to focus on this number right here, 4.
The sheer ferocity, discipline, and efficiency of the Roman counterattack up that hill was so overwhelmingly crushing that this entire world-changing conflict was totally over in just 4 hours. To put that into perspective, in ancient military logistics, battles and sieges could drag on for days, weeks, or even months. A 4-hour battle is a literal blink of an eye, 4 hours to decide the fate of an entire region.
Within that tiny little window of time, Pharnakes' army was utterly shattered and he was forced to run for his life, leaving his kingdom in complete ruins behind him. With Pharnakes totally routed, Caesar didn't just win some minor regional skirmish. No, in a single, masterful stroke, he cemented Rome's absolute, undisputed control over Anatolia and the entire eastern Mediterranean. This wasn't just a military win, it was a massive political statement. It effectively secured his eastern flank, allowing him to return to Rome not just as a successful general, but with this undeniable aura of an invincible conqueror, which severely accelerated his rise to absolute dictator.
Realizing the sheer magnitude and honestly ridiculous speed of this victory, Caesar knew he had to send a dispatch back home. So he pens a letter addressed to the Roman Senate as well as a more personal note to his close friend and trusted advisor, Machentius. Now, Machentius was a crucial guy in Caesar's inner circle. He totally understood the intricate political theater of Rome. Because of this, Caesar didn't bother writing some long, drawn-out tactical scroll detailing troop movements, flanking maneuvers, and boring logistics. He knew exactly what kind of hyper-confident, politically devastating messaging the moment required.
Let's look at the fallout in Chapter 4, Echoes in Anatolia.
So why does all of this matter for us today? What's the real takeaway from a military victory that happened over 2,000 years ago on a dusty hill in Turkey? Well, the legacy of Zela is incredibly layered. First up, you have the global literary contribution. Caesar gave humanity its absolute best, enduring soundbite for speed and success. Second, the geopolitical shift was just massive. It permanently locked in Rome's power in the east. But locally, the impacts were just as profound and lasting. Today, the Zela fortress actually stands as a unique international tourism hub simply because it's the birthplace of those 3 famous words. Furthermore, this victory acted as a massive cultural catalyst. You see, before the Romans, the ancient city of Zela was basically a temple state. It revolved around the massive Amanos temple, dedicated to the Persian goddess Anahita. It was the religious and economic center of the whole region. But following Caesar's victory, this deeply rooted local Persian and Hellenistic religious structure was basically forced to integrate with Roman culture and administration, which fundamentally changed the cultural fabric and identity of the region forever.
It's honestly fascinating to think about how the violent winds of a single 4-hour afternoon in 47 BC still blow across the historic walls and hills of Anatolia today. The Zela fortress still stands there as this silent, imposing witness to the exact moment when the fate of the ancient world pivoted on an axis of incredible speed and just unshakable confidence.
As we wrap up this explainer, I've got a question for you to chew on. Caesar clearly understood the power of brevity and the absolute unmatched power of framing his own narrative perfectly. So when your defining moment comes, when you face your own uphill battle and manage to come out on top, how are you going to choose to tell the world? If you had to summarize your greatest victory in just 3 words, what would they be?